The bell above the door jingled like a warning, but Eleanor Hayes didn't look up right away. At 91, her hands moved with the rhythm of decades, kneading dough that carried the scent of fresh rosemary and memories long baked into every loaf. Then came the voice, sharp, entitled, slicing through the warm air of her tiny bakery like a knife through soft butter. "This bread is stale. Old woman, do you even know what fresh means anymore?" Eleanor's heart stuttered, but her hands didn't falter. She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting the eyes of the man in the tailored suit, his watch gleaming under the soft morning light filtering through the lace curtains. He was Richard Beaumont, the kind of rich customer who drove into Willow Creek from the city, flashing his wealth like a badge. "I've eaten in Paris, in Rome," he sneered, tossing the half-eaten slice onto the counter. This is garbage. You should have retired years ago. Spare us all your outdated slop." The words hung heavy, echoing in the quiet shop where generations had come for comfort in crusty forms. But Eleanor didn't snap back. She had outlived wars, lost a husband to the sea, and raised 3 children on flour and fortitude. Instead, she smiled faintly, her wrinkled face creasing like well-worn leather. "Bread takes time, sir. Like life. Sometimes it's the wait that makes it sweet." Richard snorted, slamming a crisp bill on the counter far more than the loaf cost, and stormed out, his luxury car roaring away as if the town itself offended him. The rest of the morning blurred into routine. Neighbors trickled in, old Mr. Jenkins for his daily rye, chatting about the weather, young Lila from down the street, grabbing muffins for her kids. Each one brought a story, a laugh, a reminder that Eleanor's bakery wasn't just a business, it was the heart of Willow Creek. But Richard's insult lingered like a bad aftertaste, stirring doubts she hadn't felt in years. Was she too old? Had her recipes lost their magic? By noon, Eleanor stepped out back to her garden, where herbs grew wild under the sun. She plucked fresh thyme, inhaling its earthy promise, and thought of her late husband, Tom, who had built this place with his own hands after the war. "Bread feeds the soul, Ellie," he'd say, his voice rough from years at sea. She missed him fiercely, especially on days like this when the world felt unkind. Back inside, she prepared for the afternoon rush, or what passed for one in a town of 2,000 souls. As she shaped loaves, her mind wandered to her own youth, fleeing the Dust Bowl as a girl, learning to bake from her grandmother in a one-room cabin. Those lessons weren't just about yeast and ovens. They were about resilience, about turning scarcity into sustenance. "One day, child, your bread will heal hearts," her grandmother had whispered. Eleanor had believed it then, and she clung to it now. The bell jingled again, pulling her from reverie. This time, it was Mrs. Patel from the corner store, her sari bright against the muted tones of the bakery. "Eleanor, dear, that man earlier's a fool. Your sourdough saved my husband after his surgery last year. Kept him going when nothing else would." Eleanor chuckled softly, waving off the praise. "It's just bread, Mira." But inside, warmth bloomed, chasing away the chill of Richard's words. As the day wore on, Eleanor baked batch after batch, cinnamon rolls sticky with glaze, baguettes crisp and golden, hearty whole grains studded with seeds. Each one carried a piece of her love folded in, patience proofed overnight. Children pressed noses to the window, drawn by the aroma. Elders lingered over coffee, sharing tales of yesteryear. This was her legacy, not the insults of strangers. Yet, as closing time neared, a storm brewed on the horizon, literal and figurative. Dark clouds gathered, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. Eleanor glanced at the clock. For p.m. She wiped her hands on her apron, feeling the ache in her joints, a reminder of time's relentless march. Little did she know, Richard Beaumont's world was about to crumble, and her bread would become his lifeline. Hours earlier, Richard had sped back to the city, his mind already erasing the quaint town from memory. He was a titan of industry, CEO of Beaumont Enterprises, where deals were closed in boardrooms overlooking skylines. But today, a crisis loomed. His only daughter, Sophia, lay in the hospital, her rare condition flaring up again. Doctors had warned stress could trigger it, and Richard's life was nothing but. Sophia, 25 and fragile as porcelain, had always been his anchor. Born prematurely, she'd fought for every breath, and Richard had built his empire to give her the world. But money couldn't buy health, and lately, her allergies had worsened, leaving her unable to eat most foods. "Dad, remember that bread from Grandma's stories?" she'd say wistfully. Simple, Purino additives. Richard dismissed it as nostalgia. Until now. Back in Willow Creek, Eleanor locked up as rain began to patter. She trudged home a modest cottage 2 blocks away, her basket heavy with unsold loaves. The storm intensified, winds howling like lost souls. She lit a fire, brewed tea, and sliced into a warm loaf, butter melting into the crumb. Peace settled, but unease nagged. That man's face, hardened by privilege, haunted her. What pain hid behind his cruelty? Unbeknownst to her, Richard's car hydroplaned on the slick highway back to the city. Skidding into a ditch, he emerged shaken but unhurt physically. His phone buzzed. "Sophia's doctor. She's stable, but she needs something gentle to eat. No processed foods. Her system's too weak." Panic gripped him. Hospitals offered bland trays, but Sophia craved real nourishment. Then it hit. Eleanor's bread. Pure, handmade, like the stories his late mother told of her own baker grandmother in Willow Creek. Wait, Willow Creek. The connection dawned, a twist of fate. Richard's mother had grown up here, fleeing poverty for the city lights. She'd spoken of a baker named Hayes whose bread tasted like home. Could it be? He dialed information, heart pounding. Yes, Eleanor Hayes, the same family. Guilt crashed over him like the rain. He'd insulted her, the woman whose lineage had fed his ancestors. Now, he needed her forgiveness and her bread. As night fell, Eleanor heard a knock. Peering out, she saw a drenched figure under her porch light. Richard Beaumont, hat in hand, eyes desperate. But that was just the beginning. Eleanor's hand trembled on the doorknob, the storm raging outside mirroring the turmoil in her chest. She opened the door a crack, wind whipping rain onto her welcome mat. There stood Richard, his expensive suit sodden, his face pale under the dim bulb. "Please," he gasped, voice breaking. "I need your help." She stared, the insult from hours ago fresh as the dough she'd kneaded. But something in his eyes' raw vulnerability stayed her tongue. "Come in before you catch your death," she said softly, stepping aside. He entered, dripping puddles on her worn floorboards, the scent of wet wool mingling with the lingering aroma of baked goods. Richard collapsed into a chair by the fire, hands shaking. "I'm sorry," he blurted. "What I said today, it was unforgivable. I was angry, stressed. But that's no excuse." Eleanor poured him tea, her movements deliberate, buying time to process. "Words have weight, Mr. Beaumont. Like ingredients in a recipe, too much bitterness ruins the batch." He nodded, staring into the flames. "My daughter, Sophia's in the hospital. Rare autoimmune disorder. Can't tolerate anything processed. Your bread. It's real. Pure. She needs it." Tears welled, unbidden. "And I realized me mother grew up here. Spoke of the Hayes Bakery like it was magic. You're that legacy." Eleanor's breath caught. A twist unfolded. His mother, little Annie Beaumont, née Wilkins, had been a childhood friend of Eleanor's own daughter. They'd played in these streets, shared secrets over stolen cookies. "Annie," she whispered. "She left for the city after high school. Broke her mama's heart." Richard's eyes widened. "You knew her?" The conversation flowed like rising dough, memories bubbling up. Eleanor shared tales of Annie's laughter, her dreams of escaping small-town life. Richard listened, hunger in his gaze, not for food, but for connection to a past he'd ignored. "She died last year," he confessed. "Cancer. I was too busy building my empire to be there much. Now Sophia. She's all I have left." Compassion stirred in Eleanor. She rose, disappearing into the kitchen, returning with a fresh loaf wrapped in cloth. "Take this. For Sophia. No charge." But Richard shook his head. "I can't just take. Please, teach me, show me how you make it. Maybe if I understand." Surprised, Eleanor hesitated. At 91, she rarely shared her secrets. But his plea touched a core, the human need for redemption. "All right, but it starts at dawn. Bread doesn't rush." The night passed in fitful sleep for both. Eleanor dreamed of Tom, his calloused hands guiding hers over flour-dusted counters. Richard, crashing on her couch, replayed his life's regrets, the deals that cost friendships, the wealth that isolated him. Dawn broke clear, the storm washed away. They met in the bakery, Eleanor unlocking with keys jingling like old friends. "First rule, patience," she said, tying her apron. Richard, in borrowed clothes, followed suit awkwardly. She showed him the Starterra living culture passed down generations. This is alive like us. Feed it wrong, it dies. As they mixed, stories poured out. Richard spoke of Sophia's birth, the terror of her fragility. I thought money could fix everything. Built hospitals' wings in her name. But she just wants normal picnics, laughter. Eleanor nodded. Normal is the greatest luxury. I lost Tom to a fishing accident. Raised our kids alone. Bread kept us going literally. Mid-morning, an unexpected visitor arrived. Eleanor's grandson, Jake, a burly truck driver in his 40s, dropping by unannounced. Gran, heard about the storm, everything okay? His eyes narrowed at Richard. Who's this? Twist. Jake recognized Richard from business news. Beaumont. You tried to buy out our town's mill last year, Wolvie. You put folks out of work. Tension crackled. Richard paled. That deal fell through. I regret pushing it. Jake's arrival shifted the dynamic, injecting skepticism. Gran, this guy's no good. Insulted you yesterday, now he's here. Eleanor placed a hand on Jake's arm. Everyone deserves a second chance, boy. Like when you wrecked my car as a teen, I forgave you. Jake grumbled, but stayed, watching warily as they baked. His presence forced Richard to confront his corporate sins. The mill deal had been about profit, blind to human cost. I see now, Richard admitted, kneading dough under Eleanor's guidance. I've hurt people like you, real people. By afternoon, loaves emerged from the oven, golden and fragrant. Jake sampled one, grudging approval in his nod. Not bad for a city slicker. Laughter eased the air, a bridge forming. But Sophia's condition worsened. A call came. Dad, hurry. Richard's face drained. Eleanor packed baskets. Go. Take these. And remember, bread's about sharing, not owning. Richard hugged her impulsively. Thank you. For more than the bread. As he left, Jake turned to Eleanor. You're too kind, Gran. She smiled. Kindness is the yeast that makes us rise. Yet, the day held more surprises. Richard raced to the hospital, baskets of Eleanor's bread clutched like treasures. The city loomed, skyscrapers indifferent to his turmoil. Bursting into Sophia's room, he found her pale against white sheets, monitors beeping a somber rhythm. Dad? She whispered, eyes lighting at the aroma. What is that? He unwrapped a loaf, steam rising like hope. From Willow Creek. Like Grandma's stories. Sophia took a tentative bite, her face transforming, color returning, a sigh of relief. It's perfect. Tastes like home. Doctors marveled. Her vitals stabilized, the pure ingredients soothing her inflamed system. Gratitude overwhelmed Richard, but guilt gnawed deeper. Back in Willow Creek, he'd glimpsed a life he'd forsaken, community, simplicity. Sophia, sensing his shift, probed. Who made this? He told her everything. The insult, the storm, Eleanor's grace. She's 91, sophomore, outlived more than I can imagine, yet she forgave me. Inspired, Sophia urged, go back. Thank her properly. And Dad, maybe slow down. Life's not all deals. Richard nodded, a plan forming. But first, he needed to make amends broader. Meanwhile, in Willow Creek, Eleanor hummed as she baked, Jake helping stock shelves. That Beaumont fella think he'll change? Jake asked. Eleanor shrugged. Change comes from within. Like proofing dough, can't force it. The bell jingled. Enter Clara, Eleanor's long-lost neighbor from decades ago, now in her 80s, frail but spirited. Twist, Clara was Richard's aunt, Annie's sister, estranged after family feuds. Eleanor, heard you had a Visitormy nephew, of all people. Shock rippled. Clara revealed. Richard's wealth stemmed from a disputed inheritance that tore the family apart. He took it all, left us nothing. But Annie always said your bread could mend fences. Eleanor's world tilted. The man begging for her bread had roots entangled with her town's history. Clara stayed, sharing tea and tales, her presence adding layers of emotion, forgiveness, not just personal, but generational. As evening fell, Richard returned, Sophia's photo in hand. She's better thanks to you. He handed Eleanor a check, generous, for the bakery's upkeep. But she refused. Use it for good. Help folks here, like the mill workers you almost displaced. Humbled, Richard agreed. Together, they planned. He'd fund community programs, starting with a baking class for kids. Jake, warming up, joined in. Maybe you're not all bad, Beaumont. Nights turned to days. Richard commuting between city and town. He learned more than recipes: patience from Eleanor, grit from Jake, history from Clara. One afternoon, a festival brewed. Willow Creek's annual harvest fair. Eleanor baked mountains of goods, Richard assisting clumsily but earnestly. Twist deepened. During the fair, an old letter surfaced from Clara's Atticani's final words, praising Eleanor's kindness. If Richard ever returns, Ellie, show him the way home. Tears flowed as Richard read it aloud. The crowd hushed. I was lost, he admitted publicly. But this woman brought me back. Sophia's arrival capped the emotion. Wheelchair-bound but beaming, she hugged Eleanor. Your bread saved me. But your heart saved my dad. The town cheered, bonds forging in shared bites. Yet, challenges lingered. Richard's board pressured him to resume ruthless deals. Temptation tugged, but Eleanor's voice echoed. Bread feeds the soul, not the wallet. In quiet moments, Eleanor reflected on her own life losses, triumphs. At 91, she found renewed purpose, teaching not just baking, but living. As winter approached, snow blanketing Willow Creek, Richard made a choice. Scale back his empire, relocate part-time. For Sophia. For me. Eleanor smiled. Welcome home. But fate had one more curve. Snow fell softly on Willow Creek, turning the town into a postcard of serenity. Eleanor stood at her bakery window, watching flakes dance like forgotten dreams. Months had passed since Richard's transformation, and the bakery buzzed with new life classes filled with eager faces, funded by his donations. Yet, a quiet ache persisted. At 91, Eleanor felt time's gentle pull. Richard visited often, Sophia in tow when health allowed. They'd bake together, laughter echoing where silence once reigned. You've given us family, Richard said one evening, as they shared stew. Eleanor waved it off. Family isn't blood, it's the yeast that binds us. Clara became a fixture, her stories weaving a tapestry of the past. Jake, now Richard's unlikely ally, helped expand the bakery into a community center. Never thought I'd see the day, Jake chuckled, clapping Richard on the back. But life's twists weren't done. One crisp morning, a letter arrived for Eleanor from a law firm. Inside, news of a distant relative's passing, leaving her a small inheritance. Enough to retire comfortably. Doubt crept in. Am I done? She whispered to Tom's photo. Richard noticed her distraction. What's wrong? She shared, voice trembling. Maybe that customer was right, time to rest. He shook his head. Eleanor, your bread isn't just food. It's hope. But if you choose rest, we'll support you. Sophia, stronger now, chimed in. You've taught us to listen to our hearts. Do the same. The words resonated, stirring Eleanor's spirit. At the winter solstice festival, the town gathered. Eleanor baked a massive communal loaf, symbolizing unity. As they broke bread, Richard announced, in honor of Eleanor, we're starting a foundation for elders, teaching trades to the young. Applause thundered. In that moment, Eleanor decided. She'd bake on, but share the load. Legacy isn't in the oven, it's in the hands we teach. Years blurred, but the bond endured. Richard found balance, his empire humane. Sophia thrived, starting a blog on simple living. Clara passed peacefully, her feuds healed. Jake took over daily operations, Eleanor advising from her rocker. At 95, Eleanor sat with Richard on her porch, watching sunsets. That day you insulted me, she said. It was a gift. Forced us both to see clearer. He nodded, eyes misty. And your bread? It begged me to change. The story of the 91-year-old baker spread whispers of kindness conquering pride. In Willow Creek, her loaves still fed souls, proving that even in age, one can rise anew. Value etched in every crumb. Forgiveness mends, humility nourishes, and humanity's greatest recipe is compassion.